All right. Well, hey, welcome back to Construction Conversations. This week we're here with the Construction Yeti, Mr. Matt Graves. How you doing, Matt?
What's up, guys? How are y'all?
Good, man. Well, hey, we appreciate you coming on here. I think we do want to maybe get the background on how you started Construction Yeti and maybe what it is. But before we get there, I do want to ask, you went to Texas A&M. Is that a
Colt,
cult?
yes, yes.
It
I
is a
knew where you're
cult.
going.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
You didn't have
Okay.
to ask the question. I knew.
Yeah, no, I've met a few Texas A&M Aggies, and everyone is just so heartfelt about their love of that school. It's very interesting.
I went, actually, it's kind of funny. I probably shouldn't say this out loud on a recorded podcast, but like I went
That's right.
to school there because I kind of fell in love with traditions and stuff. And then after being there for 4 years, I was like, okay, I'm kind of over some of this stuff. Like, let's get on with it.
Is it like every student like in the is there a core cadets? Like is everyone? Yeah.
There is, but not everybody. So
Okay.
like everybody was in the Corps Cadets until the 60s or something like that.
Okay.
And then they open it up for non-core people. So no, not everybody. I mean, it's still they still do a lot, but it's a fairly small. I mean, the university that's I don't even know what the undergrads are now. 60,000 undergrads. They've got
It's
like
a lot of
three
Small.
kids.
thousand.
Small. That's small for Texas.
Well, they're having to bring it back down because they basically opened up the gates. Because when I was in school, it was like 45,000 undergrad,
Yeah.
and then they just blew up. And then I think they woke up one day and it was like 75,000. So they're trying to rein it back down.
Just kids living in tents on the quad. What
No, just expensive ass apartments like
ah,
everywhere.
yeah, that makes more sense.
That in and of itself is a fascinating deep dive into student housing and the cost of
Yes.
student housing in
Yeah.
universities around the country right now. It's insane.
It's insane.
So
And like you can't even get a cheap apartment. It's all luxury living.
Mm.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's a 4-year experience. I think that's why people are going to college at this point, right? And so luxury living kind of lines up with that maybe desired lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. And all the pool parties and all that sort of stuff that go with it.
So civil engineering at Texas A&M, and then now we get the Construction Yeti. Maybe can you fill in a little bit of gap and kind of maybe what was that arc and
Yeah,
how'd you
it
get
was
to
about a
developing?
it's about a 10-year gap, I guess, because I mean I went to like you said, to Texas A&M, got a civil engineering degree. I got like halfway through engineering school and I was like, screw this. I don't want to be a proper engineer. And so, but I was kind of too far in to like back out and go a different route. So I plotted ahead and I specialized my senior year in like construction project management, which you took like one of kind of the basics of everything. But then I graduated. I graduated in 2010, got out of school, and nobody was hiring, right? Coming out of the recession. So I got on with like a real small company doing federal contracting work, like a real small niche subcontractor. And the first day they were like, "Hey, can you put together this submittal for me?" And I was like, "I don't know what that means."
Like
So,
what's
well,
the submittal?
can you write this RFI? Like, I don't
What's
know what that
that?
means. Like, and so I had to like figure everything out. And it was a real small company, so I didn't really have a proper mentor. Like everyone's hair was on fire. They were just throwing stuff at me. And so I basically lived on Google. And it was before the days where YouTube was like what YouTube has really become now, where you can almost get a college education off of it.
Hmm.
So I just Google, and then I learned a lot of the project basics there, learned federal contracting and all those acronyms there off Google. And then I switched from that company to a mechanical and plumbing subcontractor. And so at that point, I had learned construction management basics, but it was a whole new industry, whole new things. Like I was doing more civil work before, now I'm doing vertical construction, which is a whole new ball game. And so back to Google I went. So I teach myself a lot of stuff. I had a little bit better mentor there, but it's still just, drinking from a fire hose. Left there, went to worked for an owner's rep company. And so now, I've been on the subcontractor side. I got that game figured out. The owner's rep side is a different ball game. And so I go over there and back to Google I go and trying to figure stuff out. But through that process, I learned a couple things. One was like, I'm pretty good at figuring stuff out on my own. Like I like to
Hmm.
experiment and tinker and play with it and learn and fail and figure stuff out, but I'm in the minority. Like a lot of people need a mentor, need people to hold their hand because I saw a lot of people come and go, get burned out. And then what I also learned was once you get, if you're going and Googling something, once you get above like the entry level 101 of a topic, usually you find yourself on some blog website. Like AI is kind of changing it now, but you find yourself on some niche blog website and you realize like whoever wrote this is like a 22, 23-year-old marketing girl who has no clue what they're talking about. They're writing for SEO purposes, right? Like we got to get blogs, we got to get content on our website.
Yeah.
And so Construction Yeti was really born as like an opportunity for me to kind of like from a content for the construction industry from somebody actually in the construction industry. And so it started as a blog in January 2020 and then it's morphed to a Substack. We added a podcast. I found out I'm fairly decent at making memes, so I started down that path. Like, and it's just
I
it
want to hear
snowballed.
about how you make a meme, by the way. Like, what tools do you use to make memes?
Dude, I've got about 5 tools that, depending on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, but um,
He's like,
most
that's the
of
secret sauce. I can't
It
tell you that.
is,
Like, get out of here.
I want to make memes. I don't know how to make a meme.
I'll show you. People ask me all the time, and like I tell them it's not a secret, right? It's like I'll show you how to drive the car, but like you're not going to be a race car driver.
Yeah,
Like,
100%. Right, it's on you. No,
Yeah.
I just think it's so funny because you just have these opportunities to share such sort of like perfect insight and humor around a very like just unique little moment or issue, and it's just brilliant, and those pop up all the time. But clearly you're an insanely creative person to have that like ability, and then the thoughtfulness to like share it in such a fun and creative way. It's pretty anyway, good job, man. It's cool.
I've seen, being on the subcontractor side, I've seen it from like the field level, actually, like, helping the crews install the product, all the way down the owner's rep side where you're like, more high level. And so I've
Yes.
never been at a general contractor, but I've seen them from like both angles, so like I have a pretty broad view of how things work.
Yeah. I
Or
mean,
don't work.
That's
that's right.
therein lies the meme.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's pretty helpful to have that kind of wide spectrum of perspective. And I think it is interesting because I was reading your latest newsletter today. Construction Curiosity, I think is like the specific name. And it's fascinating how like today's issue is all about one of the articles is about contract clauses, which I think
mhm.
from the outside looking in, you couldn't get a more boring topic, right? But the way in which you have a guest writer and the way in which we like integrate memes and different GIFs into the educational process around that category of information, like it's that kind of thing that I think is going to draw in the next generation, which I think is really unique. But like, how did you stumble upon that format as like, hey, if I'm gonna make this content, which is inherently dry, interesting, I gotta add some tweaks, or was that just like your approach from the onset?
So when I started the Substack, that was kind of my approach from the beginning. It was, I'm subscribed, you go on Construction Dive, you go on all these other websites,
Yeah.
I'm subscribed to different newsletters, you get all this, yeah, exactly. And it's all boring white paper,
Yeah.
and you're just like reading it and you're like, this is painful. And like you read it and you have to read it like 5 times to understand what the hell they're trying to say
It's like,
because you
where's the
fell asleep.
value? Like, what's the
Yes.
thing? What's the takeaway here?
And it's almost getting worse
But
now
also
with AI
construction stuff.
because
If you'd like to sponsor this podcast, please still do. And we might say nicer things
Shameless,
about you next time.
shameless, Stephen.
we'll censor that part out. Sorry about that. I mean, if they want to sponsor me, I'm not going to argue because they need to
That's
spice it
right.
up. But but that was my thesis. So when I first started it, like the kind of the format you see, like where there's some sort of art main article I'm using. Usually, if they find some interesting article that's like usually kind of whatever's happening in the news in the world, and then I always have a meme of the week, right? And at first, when I first started it, it was more of like what I would find on the internet. Like I wasn't making anything, right? Because like, everyone's always sharing funny memes and stuff. So I always, find one that kind of related to the topic and post it. And then when I started making it myself, but that was just the same thing. It's like nobody wants to, especially since I send it out on the weekend too. I send it out like on Saturday or Sunday morning, and I feel like nobody wants to read another dry textbook white paper, about construction, especially on the weekend.
Yeah. No, I think that format really works. And I'm curious if are you able to know your audience? Like, have you gotten feedback from your audience over the years of just who's reading them and some what they're taking away from it?
Yeah, I've done. I mean, at the very beginning when it was first, I'd get one subscriber and I would try to go stalk them and figure out who it was, right? Because like, especially if it's like at a company, right? A company domain. Is this general contractor, subcontractor? Then it'd be like, if I could figure out who that person was, I'd try to get an idea. And as it's grown, it's been a little bit harder, especially when people sign up with like Gmail accounts and whatever. But what I've wanted to do, speaking of innovation, AI, and all that sort of stuff, is download the entire email list and run it through like a ChatGPT and say, give me insights of like all these company domains,
Yeah.
like who is it? But what I found when I was kind of stalking people was it's a really broad mix of people, right? There's actually like, some entry level project engineers, project managers, seniors, like owners of companies. I'm talking about general contractors, I'm talking about subcontractors, from material suppliers. But what I also found was there was a ton of people who weren't like in construction, but like adjacent. Then maybe they're working for like they're marketing for a contractor, or maybe that they're a CFO for a contractor, or maybe because what I'm figuring out, or like maybe they're a recruiter that's like just hired on with like a construction recruiter or something, but like they're now in this new space and they're trying to understand what the hell they got themselves into.
Right, they're trying to learn too. So, do you have any demographics on how many people, say, between the ages of 20 and 40 that are actually in the field that actually sort of look at this
Uh,
stuff?
no, I haven't. Not on
It,
the Substack doesn't give you that sort of demographic.
it,
Um,
it, by the way, there is a tool out there specific around this. I think it's called RB2B, Adam Robinson. If you haven't heard of it, you should check it out. And I can make an intro, but
yeah,
they give incredible insights. Yeah, highly recommend it.
interesting. I mean, I
Uh,
do on like Instagram. I mean, Instagram's more of a younger crowd anyway. And like I've got like 75,000 followers on the Construction Yeti Instagram, and that demographic is like 98% male, and it's like falls in the 25 to 35 to 25 to 40 range
yeah,
primarily.
I had a couple superintendents that they would I swear send me I don't know how many posts on Instagram sort of between the hours of 10 and 11, and it was all like construction humor or construction stuff gone bad or whatever. But for the most part, I just wonder if drawing juxtaposition to hey CFO or new project engineer, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. I'm going to search this up versus hey, I'm a plumber, I'm a drywaller. I just busted
Hmm.
my butt out there for 10 days or 10 hours today. It was hotter than you know what. And I'm really tired. I don't want anything to do with construction. I want to read nothing about it. I want to don't look at anything. So is there this like, anyways, there gap? Like, there's sometimes where I hit overwhelm. I'm like, I don't want to, I'm done. I don't want to learn anything new. Nothing about construction.
It's actually kind of funny because that's kind of the now. I mean, it took me. I mean, I first started the Construction Yeti in January of 2020. So, here 5 years later, I started the Substack 3 years ago, as it's been evolving. And so when we started the Substack, that's when I started creating like social media content because like
Right.
I started not even to sell this thing. It's free, but I got to go. It's almost. I probably have more subscribers if I said, "Hey, I'll charge you $5 for it," versus just give me your email address because everybody
Right.
thinks I'm just going to spam them. So
Right.
like
Right.
so I had to go sell it. So that's when I turned to like LinkedIn and Instagram and all the platforms. But that's what I've kind of found too. It's like the humor is you can make this meme, you can poke fun at an issue that like everybody knows and feels, and it's kind of an inside joke too, right? Because like, and make a joke like, oh, you get it, and then it kind of lets people let their guard down, and then like in the the copy of the post, all right, now let's talk about the issue, and then people are more likely to engage.
I see what I've seen on some of your content is that it's not personal, right? It's just everyone's dealing with it, and the
Yeah.
meme allows humor to enter
Yeah.
initially, and then sort of this education or conversation around whatever ridiculous thing is occurring.
It's not personal. I'll make fun of everybody, including myself.
Right,
Like,
right.
And I think maybe a next, like a whole maybe category of potential memes is just like CFOs of large general contractors. I feel like that there's a lot of ammo there. But I-
I got one for you. I got one for you.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
200 plus $1 million companies running only off of Excel spreadsheets because
yeah,
that's the only thing they know. And it's significantly impacting companies, right? It's just like there's, but it's like, don't touch it, right? The
Well,
house
and I
has
think
arms.
there's also maybe the other kind of variety of CFO, and now I'm like, am I saying too much? But there's the other variety of CFO, which is like has no construction background, and they don't need to, right? They're looking at the business through a very different lens. But then they like try and like cosplay as construction adjacent through maybe a relationship with a neighbor who, rebuilt their garage or something. Anyways, back to this though. When you look at some of the content, Matt, that you're developing in the newsletter, it's a really wide range. Like I think there was another issue that was talking about the different kind of contract delivery methods, which I thought was really good. Like there's a lot of, even just that one, like design build, like that is that is content that is not well developed. A lot of people have different understandings of what actually it is. How do you go, where do you go for inspiration of what part of the industry you're going to talk about or write about?
So when I first started it, I called it Construction Curiosities because I didn't know what I wanted to write about. So it was like whatever I'm curious about today, which made it easy but also very hard because
Yeah.
it was like every week I was like, what the hell am I gonna write about this week, right? Like, but I talk about anything and everything from like asbestos to this to that to like everything. And so this year I got more intentional and like I'm trying to walk through a construction process, starting from design into like, code and legalities. Right now we're talking about, contracting and procurement, kind of that stage. And then we're going to get into like project startup and then the actual construction side of it. And so at least it's kind of made me stop and like, okay, be a little bit more intentional, kind of map it out.
Structure. You're putting
Actually,
structure around it.
I've kind of built it out. I use ChatGPT for help too to kind of come up with some ideas of like topic ideas of like kind of misunderstood. Because that's where ChatGPT is really good at too, is kind of helping you that first level of brainstorming. You're reading, you're like, oh man, yeah, this thing, like everybody misunderstands this, or I didn't understand this until I came to the owner's rep side. Because
Yeah.
that's what there's so much stuff when I was on the sub side you got your blinders on, right? You only really care about your scope and whoever's right in front of you to get out of the hell of the way so you can get in there and get going.
Hmm.
And you kind of understand the bigger process. But when I came to the owner's rep side, like, okay, now I fully understand the process. Like honestly, from programming through all the design phases all the way through construction to closeout. And I always thought if I ever went back to the sub side, like I'd have a way better understanding, appreciation, and probably be more valuable as a partner, just understanding how it flows. So a lot of it is kind of reflecting back like I didn't understand how delivery methods were until I was on this side. And you'd hear CMAR and you'd hear like a GMP, like, oh yeah, it's a maximum price, but like what does that really mean?
Yeah. No, I think that's really powerful. Go ahead, Lars.
So civil engineer turns creative curiosity writer. There's not too many engineers that I know are good at creative writing. And maybe well, I know I'm speaking about myself, or at least I think. So I'd like to hear a little bit about like your journey around, like as a kid, did you journal? Like, did your mom make you journal? Did your dad,
No,
right? So no,
no.
no. So,
I hated writing. I still hate
so,
writing.
so how do you find energy around this as an engineer, as a construction professional? Like this excites you. Like, what is
Yeah.
this fire? What sparked this fire, and how are you keeping it going around this?
It's kind of a good question because like I've always hated writing. Like I've tried because you always hear all like the $1 million, to be a billionaire, you need a journal every day and all this sort of stuff, right? And so like there was a lot of times where like, okay, I'm gonna start journaling. So I sit down and like day one I do it, and then day two I'm like, screw this. Like I don't even know what to write about. Um, but I've always liked mentoring, kind of helping, and like just kind of honestly kind of helping the next generation kind of come up. So
Yeah.
kind of that's what one thing that fuels me is to like kind of give back that knowledge. But like when you're in school and you have to write these like essays, right? It's got to be very grammar. It's got to be very
Uh,
perfect. It's got to be
yeah.
a certain format, a certain structure. I mean, like I kind of try to write like I talk. So it's more,
It's
I can
easier.
sprinkle in jokes. It's way
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
And so it's not I'm not having to write an essay, right?
Yeah.
Or a paper. It's not the same. Then and then I can make up for the bad grammar and bad copy with like just put a funny meme in there, a funny GIF, and it kind of illustrates the point.
Well, so I love it, and I'd also say that there's a component of just get it out there, right?
Yeah.
And just get it out there. And how much? I mean, I know there's a ton of studies. I won't even try to reference something because I don't know it, but I've certainly read enough about it. Like, how much are people actually consuming when something comes in? I mean, is it the first sentence? Is it the last sentence? Is it are they reading word for word, or are they skimming it, right? Are they skimming it, trying to get those nuggets? What I appreciate about some of the stuff that you're doing is that it's fast read, it's light, it's value add, it's here are some key takeaways, and hey, on to the next, right? Because I'm being bombarded with 1,000 things, and whether it's at work or at home and kids and all life, it's just busy. But bringing humor, brevity, again, and education around that next generation, which clearly there's passion around, like that's like it's anyway. It's exciting for me as someone who's consuming the content. So very good.
It's also
I mean,
referenceable, right? Which I
Yeah.
think is really powerful, right? Like I think if I was working with a new PE, I would send them some of your articles and be
Right.
like, "Hey, go
Read
learn
this.
about different delivery methods,"
mhm.
which I think is, yeah, it is powerful. But go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say that's. I mean, I try to keep it because I mean, again, myself, like I don't like even to read, right? Like if I open up some article, right, I'll find on the internet, open up this article, and like I just see it, it's just a wall of text.
Yeah.
Like my eyes, I'm like, screw that, I don't have time for this, right?
Right.
I can't do it. But by breaking it up with imagery, memes, gifs, whatever, and then trying to keep it short, because again, people have a low attention span, like at least I do, and kind of bullet pointing things too. Like, all right, let's just bullet point this and get to the key part, so you can skim it and get to the parts you want to read. Um, I try to do some guest articles like we did last week. Um, a lot of times too, like they'll try to, that's it. I keep it short to the point, bullet points and that sort of stuff. And then a lot of times those will come in and like, there's been some I couldn't even use because like I can't post this. It's just way too much, just block of, it's a
Yeah.
white paper, right? Because they're trying to act smart and stuff. But just you can be smart without having to look smart, I guess.
I mean, the next iteration of Construction Curiosities might just be you'll have to TikTok dance your
I'm gonna
information.
quit before that happens.
That's the only
Done.
way the next gen is going to
I'm
Check.
consume.
tired.
Well, one of the things I think I've learned from you that I appreciate is really innovation at the trade level, because I think it's somewhat, coming from the GC side, we don't really talk about it. And I think
Hmm.
there's this general assumption, which I think is a false assumption in the industry, that GCs and owners are going to drive innovation. Even though every day trades have the ability to really innovate at ways that we don't have, and the GC side they don't have
Access to.
access to. And
Correct.
so what have you found, maybe, or maybe two questions. One, why is that a passion of yours? And then two, like, what have you found? Have you found that there is a whole innovation sector at the trade level, and maybe what are some of the things that are going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a passion of mine because one, I came from the trade subcontractor side. And then, kind of when you get your head out of that and you get on the owner's rep side and you're seeing stuff happen, you realize that like, yes, we play an important role as an owner's rep. The GC plays an important role in what they do, but neither one of us are building the building. The GC's not building the building, right? They're coordinating stuff to happen, but they're not swinging hammers, they're not hanging steel, they're not hanging pipe, right? The people that are actually creating a billable, installed material are the subcontractors. They're the one that actually getting the job done. Um, so arguably, they're the most important piece of the puzzle, while at the same time they're at the bottom of the hill of everything, right? They're at the bottom of the hill for payments. They're at the bottom of the hill for in the contract, and all the shit rolls downhill to them, right? Like because all the liabilities push down, 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 down till it hits the bottom. Um, and then most of the innovation, a lot of the tech and all that sort of stuff is targeted towards like the ENR 500s, right? They want these big names, they want all this sort of stuff, and so the subcontractor realm, they're the most important piece of the puzzle, while they get no support, no love in general. So it's kind of that's where my heart's always been, kind of coming from that side too.
Let me ask like a follow-up question around if I'm a general contractor and I want to find innovative trade partners, what are some of the things that I should be looking for? And you could dive deep into a specific trade if you got, trade specific examples, or even just keep it broad. But like, where is someone that I'm historically not thinking about, oh wow, there actually are innovative trade partners. I just haven't thought about it like that. This is what I should be looking for.
It's like, I mean, kind of taking a step back, like innovation. I think we all look at innovation like we think BIM modeling, we think, robots on the job site, we think new, construction tech softwares and all that sort of stuff. But like innovations such a broad term, really, especially on the trade side, because there are things like, yeah, there's, you're talking about a minute ago about spreadsheets and $200 million companies living and dying on spreadsheets, and every quote unquote every subcontractor out there is hopefully even on a spreadsheet. Sometimes it's just paper, pen, notebooks, right? Like, and so it's yes, it's some of that sort of stuff, but it's also just like I think innovation specifically like in a subcontractor is even just like having a mentorship and training program for their teams, right? Like I was never actually on the trade side, like on the tools, but so if I'm looking at like the project management side, like do their project managers know what the hell they're doing? Are they trained right? Are they going to be a valuable member to the team? Because I mean, if you got a GC, right, it's got a project manager and they're dealing and interacting with 15, 20 other project managers from different subcontractors, like, how much value is that going to give, or just be a headache, right? Because he wants to have a change order of everything because he can't read the plans and specs. He doesn't understand what's going on. And so I think just having the, you know, you have a good, solid team in all aspects. Um, and then, of course, what tools do they bring to the job? I'm talking about, not necessarily like hand tools in the field, but can they bring other tools to help, help the process, help the team?
Yeah,
Um, I've said a bunch of times in relation to an architect or in relation to a general contractor, but it would apply to a subcontractor too, that, in general, like anybody can build a building, any general contractor, any qualified general contractor can build your building as an owner. Any architect can design your building as an owner. But like, what's the experience in the process like on the owner's shoes?
what's the
Like, at the end of the day,
taste at the end of the day, right?
yeah. So, I mean, if you look at a general contractor looking at a subcontractor, yeah, any plumber is going to get the job done. But is it going to be a painful, kicking and screaming, nickel and diming headache? They don't, I mean, or are they going to be, a net positive to the team and add value and all those sort of things?
100%. And I like your sort of comment around innovation as a very broad term.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, a lot of times I think innovation is, tech or, some
Yeah.
flashy new robot out there rather than just their ability to adapt, try new things, reposition quickly. And I love, it's just like, it could be as simple as like, do you have a mentor program? Not
Yeah.
everyone is you, back, 10 years, like, hey, I'm just going to Google this because I have no one to ask, right? I think a
Hmm.
lot of people like, you just is like, I don't think anyone needs to even contact an IT department anymore. Just what's your problem? Type it into Google and it'll tell you how to fix it, right? Like it will tell you how to do that. So,
Put a
but like,
screenshot in ChatGPT and it'll walk you through the whole thing.
it's
Yeah.
crazy, right? And so like that sort of like leadership, coaching, and employees or a company around that sort of because we're somewhat robotic from when we first entered the industry, and so being adaptable, and that to me is that innovation. Because again, it doesn't have to be some new .com software on the
Hmm.
top of the other 20 softwares we're already using, right? It's no, just reframe this. And again, with the idea of it should be easier. It should be easier.
And I mean, to your question, Lars, I think some of the best trade partners I've ever bought out really revealed their innovation through the questions they asked in some of the interviews, right? It reveals intellectual curiosity. It reveals a thought process beyond maybe a standard way of doing something, a sequence of work, etc. And so yeah, I do love that idea of like really innovation starts in the mind and it reveals itself kind of in how someone approaches a job.
Yeah, I agree. Because I mean, if you're mentally open to innovation, you're going to be okay. Maybe we do find this new software tech tool, right, that can help our process, which helps the
Yep.
general contractor process, and yada yada yada. Or it's as simple as like you were just saying, like if you got the innovative mind, you're looking at the drawings, you're looking at the plans a little bit differently, right? You're looking kind of for these VE opportunities along the way. Like you're not just purely like, well, the drawings show it this way, I got to build it this way. And so you're like, oh, if we change this or do this, right, it can be a huge value to the GC, to the owner, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I mean, maybe changing gears a little bit, but and we kind of hinted at this in a little bit ago, but in an industry that is so averse to anything close to marketing, I think one of the reasons why your newsletter resonates with so many people is because it's really anti-marketing. It is you kind of authentically approaching this content. Um, but it is like if you think about it from like a meta standpoint, like you've become an influencer by trying to just approach the market kind of honestly.
Mhm.
How does that sit with you? If we as like a blogger and influencer in construction, Matt Graves.
The first time somebody called me an influencer, I was like, no, that's weird. I don't like that. And then I
Yeah,
was,
you're
are
like,
you
you
talking about
stop
He's
right?
a
that. You take that
he's an
back.
influencer in the wild, one of the
Yeah,
best.
that's right.
Well, even a minute ago when you said like, oh, you journal because you write a lot, and somebody, I was on a call with somebody a couple weeks ago, and they called me a writer. Like, oh, since you're a writer, I'm like, well,
He's
I
a
guess I am.
journal.
I guess I am. Shit,
Yeah.
like I didn't know I was a writer, but I guess like it just doesn't feel like that, right? I mean, I've just always tried to like, I don't know, keep it real and keep it honest, and I don't know. I've ruffled some people the wrong way just because of that fact, but I mean, there's a lot of kind of serious, hard conversations that need to be had in the industry. Otherwise, we're
Yeah.
just going to keep our head in the sand.
How many people do you feel are having those conversations?
Which ones? The
The hard conversations.
there are people. I think there's a lot of people on the internet who post content that act like it that don't. But um, I think any company, I think a lot of companies are. I mean, I've been on the inside of a few companies now, and
Good.
most of them are having are having the hard conversations. Otherwise, they're just not going to last. I don't think.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of transformation, uh, not just occurring in our industry, but a lot of industries right now. And
Mhm.
I think there's that saying, "What got us here won't get us there," and just the speed at which things are moving and changing goes back to that innovation, adaptability, being able and willing to try something new very quickly,
Yeah.
and being
You think it's
okay maybe if it doesn't get the result you want, right? And then small little pivot again.
Do you think it's generational? As like
Yeah.
granddaddy and daddy built the company, now the son or grandson's taking over?
Well, I definitely know some, family-owned generational companies on their, third or fourth generation that, there's a lot of baggage, right? And for many, many years, it was all done the same. But I'd say
Hmm.
over the past 20 years, it's moved at such an incredible pace, right? In terms of technology-driven
Yeah.
change, which really translate to speed and how much information comes at you. And I do know that there's challenges in those companies just because it's like whether you make it about the change of the tech or you make it about the person doing the job because that's what that individual has done for 47 years. Now, what do we do?
Hmm.
Listen, but both just have to be dealt with, right? They just got to be dealt with.
And that's, I mean, to that point too, like I'm all for innovation and tech and tools and efficiency and all that sort of stuff, but not to like squeeze every last bit of productivity out of the field
Right.
crew or the PM staff. It's not like, oh, you have this new tool, so now instead of managing two
Yeah.
projects, you can manage four projects.
Right.
And so, but to make it where it's, I mean, I hate the term work-life balance, but to give people where they're not just completely burned out over
Yeah.
everything.
Easier. Just make it easier. Make it more accurate. Can some of this stuff do work for me, right? Rather
Hmm.
than me doing 38,000 clicks in a week, rather than, it's can I drop it down to 10? Can I just do 10,000 clicks?
Well, and I think that's where maybe tech has failed. And we've talked about this
Yeah,
before,
we
but
have.
like, it's 2025. We have a lot of tech. There's, tech saturation at the field level, but it hasn't yet really impacted the field's life in a positive way. And I think part to your point, Matt, is because I think we are collectively, all of us, are approaching these new technologies, these new innovations with our commercial hats on and not our human hats on. And I think that's the big risk with AI I see is not that, yes, it's going to transform parts of our business. And I think there's a lot, obviously, that's going to happen. But the biggest risk is we make decisions about AI with our corporate hats on and forget that, hey, we're all team humanity. And we only get kind of one shot at this. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, to segue a little bit, Matt, do you see, and I do also like in your newsletter, you've got kind of one section where you kind of highlight a tech that you like. Have you seen any tech at a trade level that you think is just really responding to a need and is really driving value in a unique way?
Kind of, I was going to mention a second ago on your last point, but like, I guess a little bit of a plug. Like, I just joined BuildSync as an advisor, and
Yeah.
they automate submittals, submittal review talking about, like burning people out and that sort of stuff, right? Like if you go to their website, they've got a calculator show you how much money you're going to save. So they've got to sell it to the business owner, sell it to the CFO, right? To cut the check to buy the software. So there is the commercial aspect of it. And they show you like how much if you use this versus having somebody manually do it, there's going to be an ROI. But at their core though, their core is just like, and this is why like I really resonated with them, is to make submittals less sucky. Like honestly, like it's a horrible process. You lock some project engineer in like in the job trailer, right, and say, okay, review these 100 submittals in the next 3 weeks as they're coming
Yeah.
in. They're pulling up you're talking about bad white paper content. Just go open up a spec book and start reading the spec book, right? And reviewing a cut sheet versus a spec book and going line by line. It's just an
Yeah.
awful process. And so at their core, it's to make that process better, right? Basically relieve the project engineers of that just awful duty. And then in turn, right, there's going to be an ROI because they're going to spend, you know, 30 minutes on the submittal instead of an hour and a half per submittal, right? So it's just, but also in construction, when do you do submittals? You do them at the very beginning of the project. What's the most critical time of a job? The very beginning of a project. Like everyone's trying to work out the bugs of like how everybody works together. And so you're going to lock these people away to go do this when they could be, being more proactive and some other stuff.
Yeah.
And so to kind of answer your question, it's like stuff like that where, when and those are the kind of companies I think are going to get better adoption too from the field. Like you can sell the business owner, you can sell the CFO on this software that, on paper shows an ROI, but if it doesn't really move the needle for the field
Yeah.
people, like you're not going to get adoption of it from the field. And if the field's not using it, then you're it's a negative ROI because you're wasting money on
Yeah.
something you're not
100%.
even using.
But so cue the crusty old project executive who says, "Well, listen, I spent 3 years of my youth going through submittal reviews, and that was the foundation of my knowledge set, was that experience." And I think there's, not to completely discount that perspective, because I think it's, there's validity to maybe somewhat learning through osmosis, but like how would you respond, or how would BuildSync respond to that maybe educational component that may be
It's kind of
lost?
funny because that is the number one argument that they get all the
Yeah.
time is like, what? No one's going to learn if they don't read the
Yeah.
specs, they don't read the
Yeah,
submittals.
right.
Like they don't
They
learn
have
any
to
other
go through
way.
this inhumane process to
Yes,
learn.
yes. They have to earn their stripes just like I did
Yeah,
20, 30 years ago, right? Like,
right.
I mean, their argument, and I believe it, and so I'll repeat it, is that you're still doing the submittal review, but instead of reading, a 2,000 page spec book, it's helping you identify the important parts. It's helping you pull out they just kind of automate some of that manual admin work. They're not doing everything for you. You're still as a human in the loop supposed to go review it all, but it just helps you pull out and highlight, okay, this is important and it matches the drawings on the specs. The cut sheet matches the specs. It just does that and it actually helps them understand what to look
What they're
for.
doing. Yeah.
Yes, what they're
It
doing and what to look
it's their
for.
mentor.
It is their mentor. It's a robot mentor because that crusty old
Yeah.
project executive you talked about, his idea was like, well, after you read the spec book on 3 different projects, you'll know what you're doing. And so like, and if you've never, without having some direction, if you ever open up a spec book and open up a cut sheet and be like, uh,
Yeah. Listen, the last when the power goes out, we still got to be able to build stuff. And it's like, well, shoot, now I don't know how to review a submittal. I've been doing it for 20 years, right? So I think there is a solid argument for like, okay, as part of our onboarding process for, say, a new recent graduate or something, that's like, yeah, just go do this for 3 projects. Yeah, it's gonna suck, but guess what? You're gonna learn it, and then we're gonna give you a really slick tool that's gonna accelerate you and speed things up. But you've
Yeah.
read this stuff. You've read it. You got to read it.
I think, yeah, you got to read it. But I think too, it's like if you can cut that review submittal time down in half, well, now you free them up for another half where they can actually go out in the field, see how it's getting
100. Well,
implemented.
again, I call it, get them out of the admin, which is just overhead, and get them into, revenue producing, risk managing activities.
Yes.
That's the tip of the spear rather than the tail wagging the dog. But the
And
Yeah.
capacity of time has to be reintroduced to allow for that to occur because there's only so much time in the day.
Hmm.
I think we'll get to a point in the industry where we're not leaning on bad process for our educational onboarding. Like that doesn't need to be it, right? Like maybe if
That's my
that's how you're
dream.
leaning, yeah, if you're leaning on a bad process to teach your people, maybe you need to revisit how you onboard new people into your company, right? Or just go read a construction curiosity from the
So,
Construction Yeti.
Well, think about
so
that. What you just said, though. I'm sorry, Lars, but if you like, okay, go read the spec book and you'll understand how to do everything. But then the
Yeah,
other side of the argument is like, oh, we can't read the spec because most of that's copy and paste and it doesn't apply to our project anyway.
yeah, that's
Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think now like that we started the conversation the way we did, I see everything just through a meme that you would potentially create. So I
everything's
feel
a
like there's
meme.
a few.
Everything is
Yeah,
a meme.
life
that's
is a
right.
meme.
So, 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 Matt, in your work experience with the companies that you've worked for, uh, well, I don't want to ask it that way.
Yeah, you just
How
walking
many?
down the road of naming names.
I know,
That's
no, no, no. I have personally found that
Plead the
a
fifth
lot
on
of
that one.
construction companies struggle in onboarding because they're just they're they're typically hiring someone in a responsive way, right? And their day to day is already they're putting out so many fires. They don't have a mentor program, and it's sort of like out of pure like desperation, right? They finally found someone. They throw them into the the crucible or the arena, and it's like, all right, go. It's like, huh? So, and if you think about your experience, you went to a small. Now, I'd say maybe the bigger companies have more resources, but what in an industry or how is the industry responding and helping companies onboard and giving them those resources? I don't know.
I don't think it's changed. I mean, again, I've been in the industry for 15 years now. Graduated in 2010. I'm not sure it's greatly improved a ton, to be honest with you, from the days when I was hired to go write this RFI, and I don't know what that means to, you know, to today. And I mean, maybe, and maybe there's, there's more courses online, right? There's all these courses like go, and they're awful.
Well, I think what we did was we just developed your maybe business model for 2026, Matt, which is, hey, let's do onboarding transformation with Matt Graves.
You know,
Come hire me.
it's funny. I mean, my mind is all over the place, and with just business ideas and everything else. And most of the time, it's like, let's have a partner. I'm not going to get it done just because I'm more of like I've got the ideas, but actually sitting down and putting it into fruition is kind of not really my strong suit. And but here you go. If you want to partner up on this, um,
I like it.
what I wanted to
Construction
do,
conversational Yeti.
I
It's a
love it.
collab session. Keep going. Sorry, I interrupted you.
So I'll put this out there, but it's an idea I've wanted to do for a while now, and it's because I actually saw this happen in a company I worked for. So most companies don't really have like a project management manual, not just like a dry white paper how to do this, but to really help and mentor those people not only coming into the industry from school or any other industry because there's a lot of people like that, but also maybe coming to this company from another company, right? This is how we do. This is our philosophy on change orders. This is our philosophy on scheduling. This is our philosophy on this is how we do our budgeting and our financials. So helping a company create that, but then you can create it. It's going to sit on every project manager shelf, project engineer shelf, collect dust, and not get. It's useless. Actually, do like interactive training with the PM staff, and so basically walk through the book. Say it's a 12 chapter book, doing like a monthly training, right? So chapter one is say budgeting, right? So, okay, let's talk about what we're doing. Let's have a question and answer session. There's be some senior people within the company and give some, insights and input of the company, right? There's going to be some junior entry level people that are needing to absorb a lot more. And then as a part of that, do like an exercise, a practice budget, right? Like, all right, we have this project here, we're going to do this, and doing it in the company's way that they want to do
Way.
business, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then doing that walking through and having like an actual hands-on training experience.
I mean, I think that's really powerful because one, it respects the brain. It respects how people learn. And I think that's the thing that people so often forget is your brain isn't going to retain a 2,500 page spec book in the same way it's not going to retain a giant, ring binder that you dropped on his desk. And so I love that idea. And I think there's a lot of potential opportunities there. I know we're running out of time, Matt. I think before we go though, I do want to maybe one quick fire question, then we'll follow up with a couple. But like, was there any books or articles that you've read, maybe recently or in your past, that like kind of turned on a light bulb for you and on your path?
Um, there's a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, and
Mm.
and it kind of, if you don't want to read the whole book, kind of the part that really stuck with me was like, I mean, essentially you get an inbox from everywhere, right? And whether it be your email box, like calling you, somebody just walking by and telling you this thing. So, but how do you manage all this stuff as a project manager, right? Because it's coming from everywhere, and some of it's actionable, some of it's urgent, some of it's not urgent. But basically, it really teaches you to like have a to-do list and a follow-up list because I mean, even today, I don't know how many times like, I'll like send you Steven an email, right? Like I'm getting off my court, like it's in Steven's court. Well, you don't respond, you drop the ball. So when I drop the ball, right? Because I was responsible for getting the answer from you. So kind
Hmm.
of having that follow-up list. And so that was a
That's a
big
good
light
one.
bulb moment for me, like early in my career. The other one I'd probably say is Never Split the Difference by what's the guy's name? The FBI negotiator.
Uh,
What's that guy's name?
Voss,
Yeah, Chris
Chris
Voss.
Voss. Yeah.
Yes. It's a really easy read, especially if you listen to the audiobook like I do. But it's a he's an FBI negotiator who has these negotiation tactics, and he says like how do they apply like in his actual life when he was an FBI negotiator, where he's negotiating hostages, from some guy who kidnapped somebody, right? Versus, and then how that applies in business, and he gives all these examples. It's a really
Yeah.
powerful one.
Those are two good ones. And then maybe if you think about, I think what we do know about the listeners of this podcast is we've got kind of a collection of younger PMs that are so up and coming folks that should
Hmm.
definitely read your newsletter. And then also a spattering of tech CEOs and maybe some on the PX and above kind of category. But so if you look at those two audiences, one, I think there's maybe some onboarding stuff they can take away from what you just walked through. But for the young up and comers, like if you were to redo your career, knowing what we now have from a tech suite with AI or ChatGPT, all these different things,
Hmm.
what do you, how would you approach your career if you were to start all again in this industry with what you know over the last 15 years? It's an impossible question. I don't know why I phrased it so difficultly.
It's not
Ultimately,
impossible. It's a hard question.
answer that however you want to.
I mean, I'll say, we were talking about innovation a minute ago, and I was saying, like it's not all about tech, but at the same time, if I was coming out of school, right, and I'm probably made it through college on the back of ChatGPT, because I imagine that's how everybody's doing everything today, and I get out of that and I come into this world, you're going to probably see two types of companies. You're going to see the ones that we've always done it this way for 40 years, this way we're always going to do it. And we're going to see the ones that are actually leaning into the tech and the innovation and the evolution of like, how can I use these new, generative AI tools, and whether it be ChatGPT or any like BuildSync, right? They didn't write the LLM, but they built upon it to make it something else. How can I, which companies are using these tools to make my life less sucky, right? As a project engineer. And I think, we're going to wake up in 10 years probably, and some of the top big names today are probably not going to be at the top anymore because they've done it the way they always did it. And, um, that there's a bunch of studies out there, right? Like there's not enough skilled tradesmen, but there's not enough people coming into the project management side of stuff, right? There's not enough construction project managers coming in and stuff. And so it's there's going to be a talent shortage on that side. So the companies that can actually get those people, the A players, and retain those people because that they
Mhm.
are supporting them in the right way, are going to be the ones that wake up in 10 years and are going to be at the top of those lists.
Yeah, spot on. Lars, anything before we go? All
No, appreciate it, man. That was good.
right, Matt, where can everyone find you
If you Google
as
Construction
one of the
Yeti,
few influencers in the industry?
yeah, I mean, you talk about Construction Curiosities newsletter. It lives at constructionyeti.substack.com. If you look up Construction Yeti on pretty much any social platform, you'll find a bunch of memes and other nonsense.
Good stuff. All right, that's the pod. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. We created this podcast to promote more authentic conversations in the industry. Please help us do that by hitting all the buttons and telling a friend about the podcast. Also, check out our newsletter, Construction Briefs, on Substack.